Since its disastrous launch, there's been a lot of discussion about what went wrong with Cyberpunk 2077 and how best to fix it. Bad AI, lifeless world, missing customization options, the game has no shortage of deficiencies. Presumably, with significant time and effort, CD Projekt will be releasing patches and DLC that address at least some of these shortcomings, but today we're going to talk about a major flaw that CD Projekt are pretty much guaranteed not to address because it's baked so far into the core design of the game that they'd essentially have to remake the whole thing to fix it. And that is the fact that Cyberpunk 2077's side missions are kind of hard to care about. Now, that's not true for every side mission, person who immediately jumped down to the comments section in a frothing rage. The game has a few genuine standout side jobs that leave a lasting impression, like the one about the prisoner who wants you to crucify him, or the politician who thinks someone's been sneaking through his apartment, or the sentient AI taxi service. But these quests are exceptions, not the rule. In fact, these jobs are so unique amongst Cyberpunk's offerings that they really aren't even useful for this comparison, because it's obvious why these jobs aren't boring. The developers spent a lot of time working on them. They're long, multi-stage, have animated cutscenes and a variety of gameplay mechanics, and while spend a lot of time and effort making elaborate side quests might be a valid path to higher quality, it's singularly unhelpful as a development critique. Now, V, Cyberpunk's protagonist, is a mercenary, because, well, that's the only thing the game lets you be, but that'll be a different video. V's jobs are assigned to him by underworld information brokers called Fixers on behalf of a variety of clients for a variety of reasons, legal and otherwise. A typical Cyberpunk 2077 side mission starts with a call from your local Fixer, often while you're busy doing something else. The Fixer provides you a short verbal description of the assignment, then follows up with a more detailed email. Once the job's active, V follows a waypoint on his map to a quest objective, generally a target to kill, steal, rescue, or hack, does the deed, and leaves. Once safely away, the Fixer calls again to close the contract, and at this point V would go off to enjoy his earnings, except the game doesn't actually have any off-mission leisure activities. Now, why is this setup so forgettable? Why don't we care? Well, the big reason we don't care is that V doesn't care. The game is set up to make sure that these side jobs never become anything more than jobs. To see the exact problem, let's look at one of the few fairly straightforward Cyberpunk side jobs that actually does work, a quest titled Sacrum Profanum. In this quest, you meet a monk who's been roughed up and forcibly cyber-modded by members of the Maelstrom gang, and is distressed because the gang kidnapped his brother monk for presumably similar purposes. V is tasked with rescuing the other monk. That monk's reaction to being rescued changes depending on whether V dispatches the gang members who took him in a lethal or non-lethal manner. And that's it. That's the entire quest, as basic as it gets. Single stage, one fairly binary choice, and no more complex or sophisticated than any of dozens of other side jobs in the game. And yet I can remember this one while those dozens of others remain indistinguishable in my memory. What did this quest get right? Well, to start with, it doesn't just get handed to you. The mass of Cyberpunk's side jobs are doled out to the player via phone call while they're just driving around in the city. It's completely passive and immediately forgettable. You don't walk into a seedy dive bar looking for work, you don't seek out your Fixer face-to-face in their secret basement hideout, you just get a new job flopped into your lap from out of nowhere via an unavoidable phone call. Now, in truth, the process isn't actually random. The player triggers the phone call themselves by driving through a target area. That target area, however, is very large and generally right in the middle of the street. While there are map markers you can drive to on purpose, 95% of the time you're just going to trigger the call unintentionally because the GPS routed you through on your way to some other destination. And no, there's no in-game explanation for how the Fixers know you're in the area. Contrast all this with the monk's mission, which can only be triggered on foot by locating and speaking directly to the monk. First, this is important because Cyberpunk is generally not a game that rewards on-foot exploration, even though it obviously should be. Second, the physical encounter affords the player at least some agency in either accepting or rejecting the quest, which you don't get with the phone system. Third, and this is actually the most important point in this entire video, meeting the quest giver in person means that V has direct contact with someone who actually gives a darn about the substance of the quest. These fixers have a vested interest in the quest they provide being completed, sure, but only to the extent of ensuring objective A, B, or C gets crossed off the client's list. They don't actually care what the quest is about: rescuing a lost child, assassinating a corrupt CEO, stealing classified documents. It's all the same to them. It's not like it's their kid. So V starts every side mission with an emotional buffer and ends it with the same buffer. If you fail to secure the documents, you don't see the client's anger or heartbreak firsthand, you just get a short, "I'm disappointed in your work" message from your fixer. This is especially problematic because the game still tries to leverage your non-existent emotional investment inside several of the side jobs. Sometimes you'll be given a choice to kill or spare an offending party or fudge an objective, and while these are clearly intended to be real nail-biting decisions, in execution they're ridiculously lightweight because you're never going to see any real consequences from them. The difference between letting a guy go or murdering an entire room full of innocent people ends up being a light scolding from your board supervisor. And that's basically all your fixer ends up being. For as much of the exposition and emotional heft the various fixers are expected to carry, the game never gives you any real relationship with them, or frankly any reason for most of them to even know who you are, other than a guy who spectacularly botched a high-profile corpo heist and got one of their fellow fixers killed. They just kind of pop in at random and give you jobs you didn't apply for, like they're fulfilling a natural symbiotic relationship between fixers and mercs when they meet in the wild. What's particularly frustrating about this, and about a lot of design issues in Cyberpunk frankly, is that CD Projekt has previously shown that they absolutely do know how to convey emotional depth in relatively mundane side missions. In The Witcher 3, after all, Geralt is also basically a wandering mercenary, picking up random jobs from community message boards. The difference is that he meets directly with his clients both before and after the actual job. If Geralt fails to save a farmer's daughter from a griffin, the player's going to have to see that farmer's face when Geralt delivers the news. Now, to be fair, there are perfectly valid story reasons why V wouldn't be meeting directly with his clients. You generally don't want a close personal relationship with a guy you hire to break into your boss's house and steal his dog. Ideally, you don't want to be identifiable if the job goes sideways. That's why you hired somebody else to do it in the first place. But with that said, this was a completely foreseeable issue, one of the several hundred CD Projekt Red should have caught during the normal development cycle had they not been busy trying desperately to clean up the house before their parents got home. Unfortunately, as previously noted, these issues are baked so far into the base game that patching them out isn't really an option. The best case scenario is that CD Projekt learns from their mistakes, and the DLCs/sequels either drastically revamp the fixer contracts to make them more engaging with in-person meets and fleshed out fixers, or perhaps ideally scraps the current system entirely and shifts the focus to side missions discovered on foot in the open world, with fixer contracts relegated to repeatable procedurally generated missions a la Skyrim's Radiant quests. Whatever they choose to do, we can only hope it's something different than what they're currently doing. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the matter. Spare a moment for a subscribe and notification if you'd like more of them. Thanks to our patrons, and we'll catch you next time.